let's talk about, I'm sorry, are we on? Let's talk about this cusp. Now what I have here is a bad situation because we're going to come up here to this point and then we're going to come down like this, okay? Now, this is a point of cusp here. Now, a point of cusp is a very finite geometric shape, okay? And what I mean by that is at this point right here, this curve and this curve have a common tangent at that point right there. If they don't have a common tangent, we'll see an example, if they don't have a common tangent, you do not have a cusp. And a lot of people will call it out as a cusp when it's not, which is not a good thing. Oh God, I just broke your thing here.
You're not the first one.
Oh, good. Good. I think I just fixed it too. Let's find out. Yes. All right. So if I was going to describe this, I'd describe coming up here to a curve to the right, whose radius point bears, then it's a long said curve through a central angle of a distance of, to a point of cusp, okay, of a curve, and I could say that this curve, in this case, notice I called this curve out, and I said that this curve was a curve to the right. But I can't really say that to this curve because I have this point of cusp and I'm going the other way, right? So the argument can be made that if I call a point of cusp, that's enough. But I would want to give it some more information. I would say to a point of cusp, to a curve, concave to the southeast. You see what I mean? Thence, easterly and southerly along said curve, through a central angle of blah, 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 to here. I'd also have called out the radius before that. And then I'd call out through a central angle. And I might say easterly and southerly along said curve. Just so that there would be no misunderstanding, because this can get to be a confusing thing if you're not looking at a picture, you're just looking at words on a piece of paper. So you want to make it as clear as possible. I want to make it as clear as possible. Once when I get down here, then I just call the next line. So I came up to the point of cusp, I described this curve, it went to the point of cusp, it bounded to the cusp. From the cusp, there's another curve, it's concave to the southeast, and whose radius point bears, that's along said curve, concave to the southeast, through a central angle of, a marked distance of, and away I go. And that's how I would do that. Now, remember that the cusp has the common tangent, okay? Look it up in any geometry book or Google it. Here's a direction reversals. Direction reversals without a common tangent are found in many descriptions. Do not use point of cusp in this situation. Now take a look. I have curve number 1 right here. I'm coming up, I'm going along the curve. This is the line that is tangent to this curve. Okay? Now, this curve here, this is the line that is tangent to this curve. And you can see that they're not the same, so that point right there is not a cusp. Okay?
So just to conceptually pull this together, those two dotted lines essentially have to be squeezed together 180.
Right on top of each other.
Okay.
And you got a cusp. And of course, if you turn this down like this whole geometry would swing like that.
Right.
So how are we going to describe this? Okay. Notice, now keep in mind that curve number 2 is not tangent to curve number 1. So, you could call up bearing a distance to a curve to the right, whose radius point bears, thence along said curve through a central angle, an arc length, to a curve, in this case, I would say to a non-tangent curve, because I want them to know that there's something funny going on there. It's non-tangent to this curve. Concave to the east, whose radius point bears, thence along said non-tangent curve, through a central angle of, southerly, along along said curve a distance of whatever it is, 230. So I'm going to take extra care in talking about that particular curve, because this is a funny situation. And you could get, when you're looking at a piece of paper, that could get ugly real quick. And you're talking about that attorney friend of yours that actually cuts things out and moves and stuff, you know, just so he doesn't make mistakes
Oh, yeah,
like this.
cuts it out, puts it over there, tapes it,
Yeah.
faxes it over.
So there are, these things could be a little harder to do. And that could be two pieces of property from two roads or something like that, a piece of property in there, any number of things. But do you see the difference between something like this and the custom? That's huge, that's big deal stuff. Now let's talk about a description by specific width. Now that we're experts on curves, we can do this. You see this a lot in easements. The west 15 feet of Lot 10 of Happy Valley Estates, as recorded in Book 92 of Plats, at page 35, Records, King County, Washington. So, you find the plot of Happy Valley Estates, and whatever this is for, it's the west 15 feet of it, of Lot 10 of that. So you find Happy Valley Estates, you find Lot 10, and the west 15 feet, there's something there. Let's say it's an easement. And so that, we describe that by a specific width, and that's all there is to it. The description by fractional parts you want to be real careful with, and we'll talk about this. First of all, it starts out the east half of Lot 27 of Rhonda's addition to the city of Renton as recorded in Book 45 of Plats at page 66, Records of King County, Washington. Okay, so what we have to do, we have to find Lot 27 of Rhonda Estates. So we have Lot 27, and then we take the east half of that. But how are we going to determine what the east half is? Now, if it's a nice rectangular lot, that's not too hard, you know. That's not too hard to do, but if it's an awkward shaped lot, okay, what's the east half of that? You know, I mean, I think we can all figure this out. We're going to come down here, something like that. But we could have property. And is it the east half by going halfway down this line and going halfway down this line, or is it the east half by area? Suppose this piece of property looks something like this. What are we going to do? You see, do you see the potential for problems with this kind of description? So let's say that we have a nice, neat property that's, it was done in 1968, and it's, the south lines are north and south, and the other lines are east and west. And it's 200 feet long and 100 feet long. Okay. Or let's make it a little different. 1,200 feet long and 1,000 feet long. Okay, something like that, not to scale. And your client comes to you and he says, I want to sell the south half of the property. And so you make a legal description, and you subdivide the property, and in your legal description you say it's the south 600 feet of the property. Okay? So from here to here is 600 feet. All right? Then time goes on and he wants to sell this part up here. And so he says, I want to sell the north 600 feet of the property. And you're thinking that, well, that's pretty nice. Except this was erroneous, and it's really 1,201 feet. So if you're selling the north of the property, you've got a 1 foot gap right in there.
We'll call it gas line easement.
Yeah. This guy doesn't own it, that guy doesn't own it, the underlying title holder still owns it. So, just, and we're probably gonna see some of this, but if I had to do something like this, and this was already done, this part, the 600, I would say all of the property except the south 600 feet. Then you can't have any problem. But you want to be careful with these kinds of descriptions. That's why I put that there. Now, this is a description by fractional parts, the west 300 feet of lot 5. All of lot 5 except the west 300 feet. This is what I was just talking about. If I say that this is the east 700 feet and this is the west 500 feet, and that's truly not 1,000 feet, I could be causing problems. I could have a gap. Or if it's less than 1,000 feet, I have overlaps in deeds, and then it gets into junior senior things. And that can cause a whole can of worms. Keeps you employed, right? But what I would say is all of lot 5, except the west 300 feet, because this legal description was previously the west 300 feet. And what you're doing is you're saying everything except what this guy owns. And so that's making this, no, there can't be a gap or an overlap. Now, they do have a junior-senior problem here, but that's not what we're talking about tonight, is junior-senior rights. But it's not a problem, it's just a fact, what happens. Any questions about that? Okay. Be very careful with this one. All right. A strip description. A strip description of land is you're trying to just describe what this is. This is your gas easement going through the center of this property. Okay? A strip of land lying 25 feet each side, notice I have that underlined, we'll talk about that, of the following described line, commencing at. So what I would do, I would commence at a corner, and I would tell it to go to here, along this line up to here, to the center line, because I said a strip of line 25 foot wide lying each side of the following described line, and I would describe this line. And it's 25 foot each side of it. Now you have to use the word each side, because if you use the word either side, and a lot of the laymen think that's fine, it's on either side. But what that means is that it's either on one side or the other. Okay? But if you say each side, then it's fine. Now I know a lot of surveyors that if they have a situation like this, you'll notice that if I come to here and I go each side of that line perpendicular to it, what I have here is I have this little triangle here that some people will tell you is not in the legal description, because I said it was each side of the line. And I described the line from here to here with that distance. Okay? This distance may be different. You see what I'm saying? So a lot of people on these descriptions, and I've done it many, many times just to err on the side of caution, I say the sidelines of said description shall be shortened or lengthened to intersect the lot on the east line and on the west line. Okay, so that brings them in. Now I do know several surveyors, and they say that's understood, you don't have to put it in. But I believe that I should err on the side of caution. And maybe back, a while back, Dave Bergson, he says that's just a bunch of hooey. It's assumed. Maybe back in the day it was, but I'm going to err on the side of caution. I'm going to put those things in there just to make sure. Any questions on that? Pretty simple description other than that. Used a lot for easements. Let's talk about the public land system. because everybody knows and loves the public land system, at least in the state of Washington. Let's just take a look at a regular section right here. It's a regular section. And what I mean by regular section is a section that is not on the north tier of the township or the west range of the township. Those 25 sections that are not in there. If you're to divide the regular section up, this is the northwest quarter of the section. Over here, I could describe this as the north half of the northeast quarter. Down here is the south half of the northeast. Over here is the northeast of the southeast, the northwest of the southeast, so forth and so on. East half of the southwest, west half of the southwest. Very particular on these because according to the government, the Bureau of Land Management, surveyors, when they first surveyed the section, they were supposed to survey those points and nothing else. Okay? Now that's what they surveyed. Now if we're going to subdivide the section, that's done by, usually was done by the private surveyor. Okay? Now, but the manual would tell us, the BLM manual would tell us that if we're going to do it like that, we have to draw straight lines from quarter corner to quarter corner, quarter corner, quarter corner. Okay? None of this half stuff or any of that, straight lines by that, wherever it is. Okay? Now, that makes this the northwest, the northeast, the southeast, and the southwest. If we're going to further subdivide that, we're supposed to go in regular sections, we're supposed to go equidistant and put in a point, equidistant and put in a point, midpoint on line, okay? And then we draw a line straight across. If we're going to divide it up in 4, equidistance, midpoint, 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 and straight lines, and that divides it. If we're going to do this one, midpoint, midpoint, draw. So these are called section corners, these are called quarter corners, these are called 16th corners. 16th corners, that's the 16th corner, 16th corner, 16th corner, because if you did the whole section like that, it would divide it into 16 parts. But you see, they're very specific on how they do this. Now, here's section 6. It's not only in the northern tier of the township, but it's also in the western range of the township. Things are different there. Now, we're not going to talk about that we're on a standard parallel or anything with closing corners, but we have the quarter corners and the section corners that the surveyors put in. Okay? Now, what we have to do, if we were going to subdivide this, just like the manual says, straight lines between quarter corners. Oh, I forgot that quarter corner, sorry. Right in there, like that. But now, because this is section 6, we throw all of the area of the township into the last tier. So we would have to come up here 20 chains, and then this distance from here to here is whatever it is. This point is not equal distant between these 2 points like this one was, because this is section 6, and we've thrown the area into the north part. And same thing here, we come up 20 chains and we put that there. Coming this way, and this way, we come over 20 chains, and this distance here, it is whatever it is. We come down here 20 chains, put that point in, and this distance here is whatever it is. So these are fractional lots up here, and they're called government lots. They're not allocated parts. And that's why they're called lots. They're called government lots, and they're really just lots. But because it was the government, they're called government lots. And so you have all that, and that's how those things are subdivided. So depending on where you are in the public land survey system, depends on how you're going to describe this. This piece of property right up here, if we were to divide this in half, let's say, this would be the northeast quarter of the northeast quarter of this section, the regular section, right? And this one over here piece of property here, this is not the northeast quarter of the northeast quarter. This is government lot 1 of section 6. It's not the northeast quarter of the northeast quarter. It's not an aliquot part. Okay. Now that we've gone through all that, that's your 5-minute lesson on the public land system. All right. So let's move on. Now, if we're gonna describe a piece of property in the public land system, notice that I made a legal description. This piece of property right here is the northeast quarter, the southeast quarter of the northwest quarter of section 10, township 26 north, range 7 east, Willamette Meridian. Let's take a look at it. Northeast 1 quarter, northeast 1 quarter. Or better yet, go backwards. Section 10. Section 10, northwest quarter. From the northwest quarter, the southeast quarter. From the southeast quarter, the northeast quarter. Okay? Now, that's the best way to figure these things out, okay, going backwards. But now I want you to notice something about this part right here. Notice that between the northeast quarter and the southeast corner, there's no comma. Okay? In the public land survey system, the Bureau of Land Management, the guys that are doing these things, say if there's no comma between these, it's understood that between here and here are the words of the. So, if you're going to read this, the northeast quarter of the southeast quarter of the northwest quarter of section 10. Okay? No commas in there. Now let's take a look what would happen if we just did put commas in there. Right here. Description of the public lands. The northeast quarter, comma. The southeast quarter, comma. The northwest quarter, comma, section 10. Same words, right? The only difference between that and the other description that we were looking at is we have these commas. Now, according to the Bureau of Land Management, when you have a comma between these things, the comma stands for, this comma stands for and the. So, what this is saying, the northeast quarter and the southeast quarter over here, and the southeast quarter, and the northwest quarter. So what it's describing is three of the quarters of the section. And it's just that comma that's making the difference. And I can't tell you how many surveyors put that comma in there when they mean to do that. And the reason that they do it, and these are good surveyors that do this, they're good surveyors, but you stop and think about it. Most of the surveyors, at least in the greater Seattle area, we're urban surveyors. We're not BLM surveyors. We're not rural surveyors. We're not breaking down sections. We're not doing the BLM work, unless we're CFEDs or something like that. But that's the misconception. So I really want to strive that to you, that the difference between this and that, that's hugely important. Now we've gone through an awful lot of stuff tonight. And I know that you all have a vice-like grip on it. And Vic, you have, are you going to post that new one on the web? That new,
It's already up there.
Oh, it's already up there? Okay, so the new one's on there. And I really believe that the only difference is I only have 2 slides to a page, and I've got that bounds description that God gave Moses. So, on there. So, let's talk about it. Any questions? I hope one thing that you really got out of this is that you have an understanding now of what a controlling element is and what an informative element is, and especially for curves, how important geometry is. You have to know that geometry, you have to know that arithmetic if you're going to put these curves together, and you're going to put these legals together, and you're going to verify that it's correct. That's really important. Okay?
Well, I'd like to say for you guys that are in the field, you're not going to be writing any legal description, but hopefully the project that you're going out on, the property you're going to survey, has the legal description in the file. And so now you should be able to understand it, read it, take a look at what you're doing out there compared with the instructions you're given. So you can start making an analysis. And essentially that's what you get graded on when you take your LS test, is how you can analyze.
Oh, yeah. And you start working as you go up in your career. Prime example, when I was a rear chainman, I was scared of attorneys. I'd never get near an attorney. I just, because they're going to hurt me, or they're going to do something, or they're just so much smarter than I am. I just wouldn't get near them. And now, as a professional land surveyor, we work with them all the time. They're colleagues of ours at a certain extent. And we work together all the time on a lot of different issues. And that's just another part. This and the legal part of being a land surveyor is just another part of our profession and how we work together. And if you don't have any questions, that's all I got. Great. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.